understand that we are in our series on exploring the world of thought. And this happens to be the first episode of that series already. You can see it displayed on your screen even as we speak. So this being the first of its kind, talking about exploring the world of thought and just getting to know more about the thought world and how to take advantage of it and make the most of it. We are going to be looking at something that comes into play when we talk about thoughts and thinking. And today we're just going to be talking about intelligence. Know that for one to master a field and become adept in it, it's very important that that individual understudies that field of interest to understand how it works, to understand the nitty-gritties, to understand the technicalities and everything about the particular field so that they can master in that field. Like it's already said, when you know better, you do better. And good understanding produces grace, and every great undertaking is sustained by a great understanding. So we are just going to look at that to understand what intelligence is and the world of intelligence. From there we can proceed to exploring the world of thought, since intelligence is a critical factor in the matter of thought. So what is intelligence? What really is intelligence? I'm not going to use so much of the established definitions of intelligence that we already have or the dictionary meanings of intelligence. It's my intention to bring us into understanding, so I'll try to avoid any formal definition that will remind you of typical classroom. Rather, I'll try to break it into bits and pieces so that we can easily comprehend it and make sense of the things that we say. When we talk about intelligence, most of the times what people think, mostly when we say a person is intelligent, so this individual knows a lot, is full of information, is full of knowledge, is just very, very vast. And they think of majorly in terms of how much a person knows when you say he is a very intelligent individual. But based on my evaluation and my thinking also, and from what I've come to understand, and this may come as a great shocker, intelligence has nothing to do with knowledge at the initial time or at basic level. It has nothing to do with knowledge. When we say a person is intelligent, we are not trying to quantify their level of knowledge or the level of information they possess. Intelligence has nothing to do with how much a person knows. When we talk about intelligence, we do not refer to how much a person knows or what level of information is available to them. What is intelligence? Intelligence is simply a function of how a person thinks. It has nothing at its first place to do with how much a person knows, but how a person thinks. It has everything to do with how a person thinks rather than how much or what a person knows. Intelligence is a function of thinking, not first a function of knowing. Intelligence is a function of how an individual thinks, not how much an individual knows. And that is why you see that in trying to explore the world of thought, it's very important we make our first stop here. So when we say intelligence is a function of thinking, and particularly how a person thinks, what do we mean by how a person thinks? Well, a few things that includes the following: how fast the person thinks, how deep a person thinks, how sophisticated the person's thinking is, how elaborate the person thinks, how critical the person thinks, how concise the person thinks, how organized the person thinks, the depth of a person's thinking, the brilliance of his thought. That's what accounts for the person's intelligence. And this is very critical that we should know, because when we talk about people being intelligent, we're always wanting to say, well, how much does this individual know? Okay, let's go and question him and see what answer he will give. But an intelligent person will give you a brilliant answer, not necessarily based on what he knows concerning the field, but actually as a matter of how he's able to put together the subject of concern and then produce an answer based on his ability to wrap his mind around it. And that's why you see every intelligent person is always an original thinker, or they can take primary thought and improve on it to create something entirely new, because the function of how a person thinks. And mind you, say how fast a person attacks a matter, how deep the depth of his thought, how critical it is, how sophisticated it is, how brilliant it is, the contrivance of a person's thought. Like you can say a structure is beautiful, a building is beautiful, a design is beautiful. How beautiful a person's thought is, and a person's ability to attack issues based on very commendable and remarkable system of thinking. That is what intelligence is. I'm going to give us two illustrations and two stories to really give us understanding and in this light. The father of artificial intelligence, Alan Turing, was an English mathematician and computer scientist who lived about 70 years ago. In his significant publication, he was talking about building computers because there were proponents and people that were visionaries, or they had a heart for what potential the world of computers had, and they could foresee it because computers in those days were doing things that 100,000 times faster than any human could do it. And mind you, it's a matter of thought. And so they were experimenting and thinking about computers' ability to process things. One of the questions that he wanted to answer was, can computers think? I'm going to just try not to go so deep with this so that I don't carry our thoughts away from the subject matter. But he was trying to answer the questions, can we make computers to think? And so he devised a scheme that's now known as the Turing test, or the imitation game. And the test is all about putting three participators in three different rooms. And one of them will be a judge, or a group of them will be judges. The other will be a computer. And then the third will be a human being. And then the objective of the game is that both the user and the computer will be in different rooms, and so also the judge. And the user and the computer will communicate to each other via messaging. Their messages will be accessible to the judge, the panel of judges, or a judge if it's just an individual. The objective is to see who amongst the human and the computer will be able to convince the judge that they are human. So we are going to have a robot chatting with a human being, and they're having a good time in conversation. And while the judge is able to interact with both of them, to question both of them, and then they will see if the robot will be able to convince the judges that he is human and not the human, since the judge is not seeing any of them and none of them are seeing each other. So the judge will have to evaluate based on the capacity and the ability of the users to interact with them. So they keep on asking questions and test their ability. Over the years since that test had been going on, one of the ways that the judges get to detect the computers, if they are human beings, is by asking them questions and information that, humanly speaking, no individual will be able to possess that kind of knowledge. And sometimes given a very outrageous computation, maybe like 500 times 3.4569, and maybe the computer gives an answer, and it's like, oh no, a human being won't be able to give that kind of answer within the space of time. But you see, Turing's idea to build an intelligent system was the question if computers could think. That was his idea about the whole test, because the computer could think, he will understand the problem, and then his thinking will condition his response to the overall situation. And so if we study the field of artificial intelligence, we see that computer scientists are not interested in building systems that have access to knowledge, because it's very simple to build a system that has access to a knowledge pool that when you say, what is this, it will just bring out a lot of answers for you to see. They were trying to achieve a state of mind within the computer. And that is why the heart or the heat of the subject or what was in concern was the very question, can computers think? And that gave birth to the whole field of artificial intelligence and machine learning, as we see it's all over the place today, trying to achieve the state of mind within a computer program, or try to simulate the human mind within a computer program to see if they can build models of computer that could simulate the human thinking process. And amazingly and quite interestingly, a lot of breakthrough has been done in this respect. And one of the principal breakthroughs that came, which is now a very critical aspect of machine learning, is the development of what is called ANN, and we must have heard a lot of it, artificial neural networks. And artificial neural networks, it's a computer learning model that is built using the human neural system, because we know that the human nervous system consists of neurons that serve as wires, and so it has a structure. The artificial neural networks are developed by studying the human neuron and how the structure and how information is transmitted and the broadcast of impulse within the cognitive structure and faculty of man. Can computers think? Give birth to the field of artificial intelligence. So this relates to you that intelligence is a matter of a person's thinking. And of course, there's a place for information and knowledge, but that's not the critical factor. Thinking really accounts for intelligence. It's how you think that makes you an intelligent person. We're going to now look at a second example I illustrated. Back from earlier times, even down to 19th century, there's this philosophy, and it's the idea that genuine knowledge can only be derived by physical senses. What we see, can test, can feel, and can really judge about it. And that is the kind of knowledge that the field of science was built on. So you have people drawing conclusions and facts from evidence or experiments that have already been carried out. From this kind of experiments, they pulled out their facts from. They were able to bring out results from. So when I want to study in a field or inquire into something, I carry out an experiment and I wait for the result of this experiment to tell me what this is. And so that was how science progressed. That's why you see scientific theory, talk about your hypothesis, your tests, your observation before something is established. Nobody came with a prior impression because it will spoil the scientific inquisition. They waited for the experiment to give them what should be their knowledge, and that was how they thought. Within those period, and even eventually that was the case until certain scientific operators began to come out that changed the order of science. And principally, one of those players, as we talk about now, was the man Albert Einstein, which every one of us knows. As a matter of fact, if you Google the word genius today, you will see his picture pop up because his person is synonymous with the word genius. And he is known to be a very intelligent man. Albert Einstein, being one of the most intelligent physicists or scientists whose magnificent discoveries has been critical to the development of the new physics and some of the possibilities that we have in our world today, was a scientist like any other. He was not particularly very excellent in knowledge. As a matter of fact, he was very excellent in only the things he knew. And so if you read through his biography, you could see a lot of failures. Even getting into the Polytechnic, he was able to only pass 2 of the subjects while he failed everything. Too bad to even get him in. But you see, we're talking about science being a field where knowledge is attained by experiment and testing. But when this particular individual came on board, he changed the order of things because he was an intelligent fellow, but yet not according to how society will see it, because he could only pass certain subjects but would fail the rest. And he was doing terrible in school, you can say that, only passing a lot of subjects but failing everything. That's the kind of individual that the world will reckon today as being a genius. And so I'm only saying that so that you can know that the structure of the academic setting doesn't really define who is intelligent. The examination in school does not determine intelligence. So we can already see that with this individual. What happened? Much later in life, he couldn't even secure a job in an academic institution, so he ended up as a clerk in a patent office. Being a clerk in a patent office, his work was just to go through people's submission for patents and just confirm if there were already things in that line so that nobody is copying anybody's work. But you see, sitting down on that desk in the patent office, just being a clerk, his mind began to revolve and began to explore the possibilities that were in his world. And Albert Einstein changed the order of science and physics in the sense that he didn't carry out the experiments to to come out with theories. Rather, he thought them out and came up with theories and then left science to confirm what he thought about. He was more like prophesying to science, and he'll be like, this is what happens when this happens, and they'll be like, no, that's nobody knows. Well, go out there and confirm it. And you could see that was his operation. He was a thinker, and that is what accounts for his intelligence and his difference from every other scientist. He was a thinker. Remember, he said it's a function of how a person thinks, and he thought unbelievable things. Just unbelievable things. If you look at his theories and principles, especially the principle of general relativity, it's unbelievable. There was one time he was sitting down in his office and began to explore the nature of gravity. And of course, Isaac Newton did quite a remarkable work on the nature of gravity in the 17th century, coming up with Newton's gravitational theory and all that. But he sat down and rediscovered gravity and gave a different approach altogether to gravity. And at the end of the day, by the time he finished his thinking, he told the scientists of the day, based on his theories, that light would deflect. We all know that light travels in a straight path, but that day he was able to think and come to conclusion that it's possible for light to deflect. And what that means is light traveling in a straight path as usually, as we know, but he told them there's a possibility under certain circumstances for a light to bend in its path when it's traveling, and it was unbelievable. And so the only way to prove it was during an eclipse, where when we see the stars outside, we get to see stars at night, but we don't see stars during the day, not because there are no stars in the sky, but because the light of the sun makes them unseen because of its brilliance. So he propounded that where there is such a large body in space, a massive body around, to warp around its space-time, and maybe that's not something that somebody might be used to, but at the end of the day, around the large body, space-time will be curved and even light will deflect. And so you see, there was expedition over the course of 10 years trying to confirm what he said. That was because they were waiting for eclipse to occur where the light of the sun will be obscured, and they'll be able to measure the position of stars around the sun with respect to times when the sun had not risen to where they were, to measure the deflection of stars around the massive body at the sun. He even gave a calculation on how much it will be deflected, and when British astronomer would eventually come up with his observation of an eclipse, it was accurate. So it's more like somebody prophesying to an individual, you go out there and check this is what you find. And he came up with such remarkable feats, not because he was doing experiments in a physical laboratory, because there was no way he could do that kind of experiment, and that's such a breakthrough in science. He was more of a thinker, and you will see a whole lot of his other theories didn't come from practical experiments. It came from ways of thinking and how fast he was thinking and his level of thinking. It was so much that even when he passed on, they stole his brain. Like they removed his brain for studying. Until today, his brain is on display. That is, the man died and then they took out his brains. My God, how is this person able to come to this? You see, it wasn't a matter of how much a person knows. Reading will make you learned, it will make you vast, it will make you adept, it will make you an erudite fellow. And it may help you to attain to intelligence, but intelligence is a different faculty altogether from how much an individual knows and from what an individual knows. It's just how a person thinks. I mean, an individual dies and they remove his brain to go and study it. And then principal scientists cut off certain portions of it and sent it to another fellow so he too could study it, to find out what made this man so intelligent. How was he able to think in a way that no human being has been able to think. That's intelligence. And you see, till date, he's known as one of the most brilliant scientists that has ever walked the earth, and his discoveries had changed the way science thinks and jump-started quantum physics. It so rocked the world of science that people lost their faith in what they had called empirical knowledge, because they discovered that it was no longer progressing and making advance based on experiments and conclusion based on the evidence of experiment, but rather now individuals were using intuition to move science to another level, just the way they thought. So that brings us to see this understanding that we are presenting to us, that your intelligence is a function of how you think and not what you know. When you fail an exam, it doesn't mean you are not intelligent. You didn't supply the sufficient knowledge. And like some fellow has said, that we are all ignorant, just that we are ignorant in different subjects. Somebody who is a renowned medical doctor may be a stark ignoramus in the field of physiology, and somebody who is an excellent engineer maybe a dummy in the field of arts or demography. So he said we are all ignorant. We are all ignorant, just that in different subjects. It has to do with a person's way of thinking. And I was talking about failing an exam. What happens? You fail an exam because you didn't supply the relevant information, and maybe because you didn't read the portions. Within this general context, passing an exam is just a matter of supplying the right knowledge, but it doesn't measure a person's intelligence, and it's a person's intelligence that accounts for a person's creativity. So from all of these things that we have been talking about, you already see the reality of what we are talking about, that a person's intelligence is how a person thinks, how deep he thinks, how fast he thinks, how strategic, calculated his thoughts are. Now, returning to knowledge, if intelligence is how you think, then your emphasis and your interest to build your intelligence should be about building healthy mental life that can facilitate the quality of your thought life, because your thought life will account for your intelligence, and it will impact your world and your life and account for how creative you are. Praise the Lord. So intelligence is a function of thinking. One of the things that powers our exploration and our exploring the world of thought is our intelligence, because our intelligence will sustain our thinking in that way. And it's one thing to be disciplined to sustain thinking in one particular direction,